The Celestial Menagerie was a monument to Xenthari supremacy, a sprawling complex of iridescent domes and gravity-defying walkways suspended above the methane lakes of Xenthari Prime. Its halls hummed with the whispered awe of 1,000 species, each meticulously catalogued and displayed like jewels in a crown. The air smelled of ozone and something sharper, pride, perhaps, or the lingering musk of captivity. High Curator Lord Vexus, his carapace polished to a mirror sheen, floated atop his anti-grav dais as he addressed the gathered elite. His 4 primary limbs gestured with practiced grandeur, each movement calibrated to convey effortless dominance. "Behold," he intoned, his voice amplified to resonate through the vaulted chamber, "the latest addition to our collection, Homo sapiens, a species so delightfully primitive, so charmingly violent, they nearly exterminated themselves before we graciously intervened." 2. There were 12 of them, selected for their unremarkability, average height, average build, the kind of faces that blurred together in a crowd. They wore the drab jumpsuits provided by their captors, their postures slack with what the Xenthari assumed was docility. Only a keen observer might have noticed the way their eyes never stopped moving, cataloging exits, scanning the crowd, tracing the paths of the maintenance drones that flitted between exhibits. Dr. Elira Vance, her arms crossed, leaned against the false rock face of their habitat. "They're adorable," she murmured, just loud enough for her team to hear. "Like peacocks who've never met a mirror." Beside her, Lieutenant Rook stifled a snort. "Thinks they'll notice if I start grooming myself like a chimp?" "Stick to the script," Vance said, though her lips twitched. "We're here to be entertaining, remember?" They'd spent months rehearsing, exaggerated squabbles over food, melodramatic displays of affection, even the occasional staged brawl. The Xenthari loved the brawls. Lord Vexus continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Observe their social dynamics. Unlike the civilized harmony of our own society, humans are ruled by base instincts, territorialism, hierarchy, even religion." A holographic display flickered to life above the enclosure, showcasing carefully edited footage of Earth's wars, its riots, its crumbling cities. "And yet," Vexus sighed, as if disappointed by their lack of creativity, "they show glimmers of potential. With proper guidance, they might one day serve as adequate laborers." Vance's fingers tapped a slow rhythm against her thigh. 1, 2, 3, 4. A countdown, though to what, even her team didn't yet know. A Xenthari child, its carapace still soft with youth, pressed against the glass. "Father," it chirped, "why do they look at us like that?" Vexus chuckled. "Curiosity, little one. Even in their simplicity, they recognize their betters." Vance met the child's gaze and smiled. It was a human smile, all teeth and no warmth. The child recoiled. The human's enclosure was a masterpiece of anthropological condescension. A naturalistic habitat, the Xenthari called it, a patch of synthetic grass, a shallow pool of water, chlorinated because of course it was, even a crude shelter modeled after what the galaxy assumed human dwellings looked like. It was like being trapped in a zoo designed by someone who'd only read about Earth in a particularly bad travel brochure. As the crowd dispersed, the humans retreated to their designated zones. Vance knelt by the pool, pretending to examine her reflection. Her fingers dipped beneath the surface, brushing the tiny device hidden there, a transmitter smuggled in by a sympathetic zookeeper who didn't realize they'd been manipulated into carrying it. "Status?" she murmured. Rook, lounging nearby, scratched his ear. Another signal. "All systems nominal. They're still running on the old security firmware. No upgrades since we got here." Vance exhaled. Good. The Xenthari were meticulous in their cataloging of other species, but their own infrastructure was laughably complacent. Why bother guarding against creatures you consider barely sentient? Across the enclosure, Dr. Hale, their resident linguist, was humming. To the Xenthari, it was just another human oddity. To the team, it was a message. Audio surveillance is active. They're listening. Vance stood, stretching her arms above her head in a show of boredom. "All right, kids," she announced, loud enough for the hidden microphones to catch. "Who's up for a fight?" The team erupted into performative chaos, shoving, shouting, a perfectly choreographed display of human violence. Somewhere in the control room, a Xenthari zookeeper would be adjusting the cameras, eager to capture the spectacle for later study. Vance let herself be pinned by Rook, her back against the fake grass as he loomed over her. His lips moved silently against her ear. She grinned, sharp and feral, right on schedule. Junior Zookeeper Crix was, by Xenthari standards, a failure. His carapace lacked the proper iridescence, his posture was perpetually hunched, and worst of all, he asked questions. He stood now in the observation booth, his secondary limbs fidgeting with the console's controls. The humans' fight was winding down, their aggression dissipating as quickly as it had begun. Too quickly, perhaps. Crix rewound the footage, zooming in on the moment the female, Vance, according to their files, had whispered to the male. Her lips moved, but the audio picked up only static. He glanced at the senior zookeeper, an ancient Xenthari named Xylus who barely glanced up from her nutrient paste. "The humans," Crix ventured, "they seem coordinated." Xylus snorted. "They're animals, Crix. They fling their own waste when agitated." Crix hesitated, then opened the human's dossier. The files were sparse, basic physiological data, a few notes on social behavior. Nothing about the way Vance's eyes tracked the security drones like a predator sizing up prey. He closed the file. Probably the Celestial Menagerie's artificial twilight bathed the human enclosure in a soft, golden glow, the kind of lighting designed to make even captivity look picturesque. The Xenthari visitors strolled past the reinforced glass, chittering in amusement as the humans performed their daily routines, or so the aliens believed. Dr. Elira Vance sat cross-legged in the center of the habitat, her fingers idly tracing patterns in the synthetic soil. To the Xenthari, she looked like a primitive creature lost in thought. In reality, she was counting the seconds between security drone rotations. 11 seconds, same as yesterday. She flicked a pebble toward the enclosure's western wall, where it landed with a soft tink against a hidden receiver embedded in the fake rock face. A moment later, a series of micro-vibrations pulsed through the ground. Morse code from her team. Phase 2 ready. Vance exhaled, letting her shoulders slump in a deliberately exaggerated display of exhaustion. The Xenthari loved that, the illusion of human frailty. Behind her, Rook and Beside staged a mock argument, their voices rising in what appeared to be a territorial dispute over a scrap of fabric. "Give it back!" Rook snarled, yanking the cloth with a theatrical flourish. Beside responded by flinging a handful of dirt, not at Rook, but at the nearest surveillance orb. The drone twitched, its lens whirring as it recalibrated. Just long enough for two to slip a modified nutrient pellet into the soil near the enclosure's climate control vent. A Xenthari child pressed its face against the glass, mandibles clicking in delight. "They're fighting again." Vance allowed herself a small, private smile. Crix adjusted his datapad, frowning as the human's latest altercation played across his screen. Something was off. The male, Rook, according to the file, had thrown dirt at the surveillance drone twice this week. Coincidence? He zoomed in. The dirt hadn't just hit the drone, it had lingered on the lens, obscuring the feed for exactly 3.2 seconds. Long enough for, what? His antennae twitched. He pulled up the habitat's environmental logs. The temperature had spiked during the blackout, just half a degree, but enough to trigger a cooling cycle, and the vents had opened. Why would they want the vents open? A shadow fell over his workstation. Silas, his superior, loomed behind him, her carapace gleaming under the sterile light. Still obsessing over the humans, Critch minimized the feed. Just routine checks, Silas snorted. They're barely sentient. Watch. She tapped a command into the control panel. Inside the enclosure, a hidden speaker emitted a high-pitched whine, a sound designed to provoke distress. The humans reacted instantly. Vance clutched her head. Rook howled and slammed his fists against the glass. Beside curled into a fetal position, rocking back and forth. The Xenthari visitors gasped, then laughed. So emotional, one murmured. Crix didn't laugh. Had seen Vance's hands. While she'd been writhing, her fingers had been tapping, counting, and the moment the noise stopped, her panic had cut off like a switch. They're faking. Vance pried up a floor panel, revealing a nest of wires. Two knelt beside her, his fingers flying as he spliced into the zoo's network. Firewalls tougher than we thought, he muttered, but they're encryptions based on fractal algorithms. Predictable. Rook kept watch, his back to them. Hurry, Crix is on to us. Vance didn't look up. I know. She pulled a slender chip from her sleeve, salvaged from a dismantled cleaning bot weeks ago. It slotted into the system with a quiet click. The enclosure's lights flickered. Then the real work began. Lines of code scrolled across 2's makeshift display, reflected in Vance's eyes. We're in, he whispered. The Celestial Menagerie's security schematics unfolded before them. Vance traced a path with her fingertip, past the exhibit halls, through the maintenance tunnels, straight to the zoo's central hub. The broadcast array, she murmured. Rook grinned. So, when do we start the show? Patience. Vance closed the panel, smoothing the dirt back into place. None of them glanced up. The humans' covert operations escalate, tampering with environmental controls, splicing into security systems. Crick's suspicions grow, setting up his eventual confrontation with Vance. The team's endgame becomes clear, hijacking the zoo's broadcast array. Tension builds as the Xentharist arrogance blinds them to the threat under their noses. Maintains the blend of institutional arrogance, Xenthari dismissing human intelligence, Xenthari dismissing human intelligence, and subtle human cunning. Yun. Vance's coded signals mirror the example's strategic brilliance theme. Dialogue reinforces character roles, Vance's calm authority, Rook's impatience, Crick's quiet unease, Crick's suspicion foreshadows Section 3's confrontation. The hacked broadcast array becomes the key to Section 5's climax. Vance's patience, line hints at the coming rebellion. Crick's third eye twitched. It was a nervous habit, one that had gotten him mocked in the Xenthari Academy. Too sensitive for field work, his instructors had sneered, their chitinous faces gleaming with disdain. Now, standing in the dim glow of the human exhibit's observation chamber, he wished he were less perceptive. The humans were wrong, not in the way Lord Vexus gloated about, their blunt fingers, their laughably inefficient bipedal gait, but in the patterns. Crix had spent cycles reviewing the footage. The male they called Rook would erupt into exaggerated violence whenever a Xenthari noble visited, smashing his fists against the enclosure walls. But the instant the spectators left, his face smoothed into something cold and calculating. The female, Vance, would scribble in the dirt with a stick like some primitive, but Crix had caught her tracing equations, advanced orbital mechanics, disguised as random scratches. And then there was the food dispenser. Crick's mandibles clenched as he replayed the security feed for the 12th time. The humans had been rationed standard nutrient paste, yet their enclosure's dispenser had malfunctioned 3 shifts in a row, flooding their habitat with excess portions. The maintenance drones found no faults, but Crix had seen Vance's fingers flicker near the access panel the day before, her movements too precise for chance. Obsessing again, Junior Keeper? Crick startled as Senior Curator Zelth's shadow loomed over the holoscreen. The elder Xentharist carapace gleamed with the iridescent polish of high rank, his antennae twitching with amusement. "The humans," Crix began, then hesitated. Zelth had dismissed his concerns before. "Are performing exactly as predicted," Zelth interrupted, tapping a claw against the screen. "See? The alpha male displays dominance rituals. The female engages in rudimentary tool use, textbook primitive social structures." Crick's third eye throbbed. "But enough!" Zelth's voice dropped to a warning hum. "The human exhibit is the crown jewel. Do you wish to explain to the High Curator why you're wasting time on delusions?" The threat hung in the air like ionized gas. Crix dipped his head in submission, but as Zelth strode away, his claws clicked against a data chip hidden in his ventral pouch. The humans noticed him watching. Crix knew they did. Vance would pause mid-scratch in the dirt, her head tilting just slightly toward the observation vents. Rook would grin, a bearing of flat, predatory teeth, before launching into another performance of chest-beating rage. That night, Crix bypassed the security protocols. The human enclosure was supposed to be impenetrable, its biofield calibrated to stun any unauthorized entry, yet when Crix input his override codes, the field flickered and hesitated, like it had been expecting him. Vance stood waiting in the center of the habitat, her back to a false rock formation. Moonlight from the simulated sky glinted off something metallic in her hand, a tool, slender and precise, that shouldn't have existed in a primitive exhibit. "You're late," she said. Crix's respiratory vents constricted. You speak Xenthari Prime?" Vance's lips curved. "We've spoken it fluently since before your drones captured us." She tapped the metal device against her palm. "But you already suspected that." The air in the enclosure hummed with a frequency that made Crick's exoskeleton vibrate. Not a containment field, a dampening field. They'd hacked the zoo's audio surveillance. Rook emerged from the shadows, his earlier buffoonery gone. "Took you long enough to sneak in. We were starting to think you Xenthari were as dumb as you look." Crick's claws unsheathed instinctively, but Vance raised a hand. "Show him," she said. Rook grunted and tossed a holocube at Crick's feet. It projected a star map, Xenthari territory, their military outposts, supply routes, all marked with tactical vulnerabilities. "This is," Crick's voice failed, "your empire's weakness?" Vance finished. "Yes, we mapped it from here. Your zoo is a treasure trove of data. Your nobles gossip about troop movements. Your engineers brag about shield frequencies. You even gave us access to your planetary network when you let us play with your food dispensers." Crick's mind reeled. This wasn't just sabotage, it was reconnaissance. "Why reveal this to me?" he hissed. Vance stepped closer. "Because you're different. You see us, and you hate this place as much as we do." Crix recoiled. "I serve the Alliance. Do you?" Vance's voice softened. "Or do you serve the Xenthari who called you defective for caring about your charges?" She gestured to the habitat's fake horizon. "You know what we've done here. You could report us." "Yes, but you haven't." Silence stretched. Crix thought of Zelth's sneer, of Lord Vex's parading enslaved species before drunken elites, of his own reports, buried for contradicting official narratives. Rook cracked his knuckles. "So, you in or not?" The dampening field pulsed. Somewhere beyond the enclosure, a Xenthari guard laughed, oblivious. Crix's third eye stopped twitching. "Tell me," he said slowly, "what comes next?" Vance smiled. Crick's defection sets up Section 4's escalation of sabotage. The hacked dampening field foreshadows the zoo-wide system takeover in Section 5. Vance's "what comes next" line hints at the coming broadcast rebellion. Alien arrogance. Zelth's dismissal mirrors the Xentharist institutional blindness. Human cunning. Vance's reveal of their linguistic fluency and tactical mapping showcases strategic brilliance. Crick's conflict, internal struggle between loyalty and disillusionment deepens his character. Vance's leadership, calm, manipulative, always 3 steps ahead. Rook's duality shifts seamlessly between brute performance and sharp competence. The air in the human enclosure hummed with the quiet tension of a predator coiled to strike. To the Xenthari visitors strolling past the reinforced observation glass, the scene was one of docile absurdity. Humans lounging on synthetic rocks, chattering in what the zoo's placards labeled primitive territorial disputes. But behind the performance, Dr. Elira Vance's team worked with the precision of surgeons. Crix, the junior zookeeper, stood rigid beside the habitat's maintenance hatch, his four hands twitching. The neural translator embedded in his temple buzzed with Vance's latest instructions, her voice smooth as poisoned honey. The announcement system's control node is in Sector 7B. Y'all need to override the biometric lock. He hesitated. This is treason. Across the enclosure, Vance pretended to examine a crude wooden tool, her lips barely moving. No, it's curation. You've seen the footage? Your leaders sterilized the Krill homeworld for aesthetic discord. They caged the Thalassi for singing too beautifully. Tell me, Crix, what's the difference between a zookeeper and a tyrant? A group of Xenthari schoolchildren pressed against the glass, giggling as Rook, the team's burliest operative, staged a mock battle with a stick. He roared, swinging wildly, and the children squealed in delight. None noticed the micro-drone hidden in the stick's hollow core, now skittering into the ventilation system. By dusk, the first cracks appeared. In the Grand Aviary, the holographic plaques detailing the majestic history of Xenthari conquest flickered, then shifted. Instead of triumphant battle scenes, visitors saw unedited footage, Xenthari warships glassing a defenseless colony, the narration replaced by Vance's voice calmly dissecting the tactical flaws of orbital bombardment. A curator screeched for tech support, but the system refused to reset. In the staff commissary, the nutrient dispensers spat out steaming trays of Earth food. A Xenthari chef prodded a slice of pepperoni pizza, his antennae quivering in disgust. "This is contaminated," he hissed, unaware that the cheese's bacterial cultures were quietly infiltrating the zoo's biometric databases, rewriting access codes. And in the heart of the menagerie, Crix stood before the Sector 7B door, his stolen clearance chip burning in his palm. The door hissed open, revealing the zoo's central broadcast hub, a towering spire of crystalline servers pulsing with lazy blue light. Vance's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Initiate Sequence Aurora." High Curator Vexes noticed the anomalies first. During his evening inspection, the climate controls in the reptilian pavilion malfunctioned, flooding the exhibit with Arctic air. As frost crept over the observation decks, the captive Xenthari, a species supposedly too primitive for complex speech, chanted in perfect Xenthari. "Hypocrisy is a cage with your own bones for bars." Vex's tail lashed. "Who taught them that?" His subordinates exchanged glances. "It must be a glitch, Excellency." Then the laughter started. It began in the primate wing, where the humans had been relocated after their aggression studies. Visitors expecting grunting cavemen instead found Dr. Criedman. Vance seated cross-legged on a rock, delivering a lecture on Xenthari social stratification. Her words, amplified by hacked audio guides, echoed through the entire zoo. And notice how their so-called meritocracy relies on suppressing dissent. Fascinating, isn't it? Now, observe Exhibit B, their reaction to being analyzed. A pack of Xenthari elites, their jeweled carapaces flushed with outrage, stormed toward the enclosure. Vance didn't flinch. She simply raised a hand, and every security drone in the sector swiveled to face them, their stun beams humming. Rook cracked his knuckles, grinning. "Told you they'd hate being the exhibit." The broadcast hub's control panel reflected Crix's face, a distorted mosaic of fear and resolve. His claws hovered over the final command. "Do it," Vance urged. "Unless you enjoy being a jailer for monsters." A memory surfaced. His hatchling sister, exiled for questioning the Alliance's purity laws. He exhaled and slammed his palm onto the console. Deep in the Menagerie's infrastructure, dormant human malware awoke. Servers screamed as petabytes of incriminating data, black site research, bribes, genocide orders unspooled into the zoo's guest networks. Panicked alerts blared as the Xenthari's own surveillance feeds turned against them, displaying their private cruelties on every public screen. Somewhere above, Vexus howled for a lockdown. By midnight, the zoo was in chaos. Visitors rioted, their faith in the Alliance shattered by the revelations. Security drones, their protocols rewritten, herded Xenthari staff into their own empty cages for behavioral analysis. And in the shadows, Vance's team moved like ghosts, planting transmitters in the power grid. Crix found her by the abandoned avian exhibit, its once proud holograms now displaying Xenthari war crimes. "What now?" he asked, his voice raw. Vance tapped a final command into her wrist console. The zoo's towering comms array hummed to life, its dish aligning with the Galactic relay network. "Now," she said softly, "we invite the whole galaxy to the grand unveiling." Above them, the Menagerie's artificial stars flickered, then winked out, plunging the zoo into darkness. In that silence, the first whispers of revolution began to spread. The darkness lasted only a heartbeat before the zoo's emergency lighting flickered on, casting the grand chamber in a dim, blood-red glow. The Xenthari elite, draped in silks spun from the wings of conquered species, froze mid-laughter, their jeweled appendages twitching in confusion. High Curator Vex's third eye pulsed with irritation as he rose from his throne of fossilized bones. "Technical malfunction," he announced, voice dripping with practiced calm. "The entertainment will resume shortly." From the shadows of their exhibit, Dr. Elira Vance watched the chaos unfold with the quiet satisfaction of a chess player seeing checkmate materialize. Beside her, Crix, his carapace now stripped of Xenthari insignia, adjusted the stolen security band on his wrist. His mandibles clicked nervously. "You're sure this will work?" he whispered. Vance didn't blink. "We've spent 18 months letting them underestimate us. Time to show them why that was a mistake." "Way!" Hum vibrated through the chamber as the zoo's central comms array activated. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the domed ceiling above them dissolved into a star field, not the zoo's artificial sky, but a live feed of the galaxy beyond. Then the broadcast began. The voice that echoed through the chamber was Vance's, but amplified, polished, stripped of all the hesitant primitive inflections the Xenthari expected. It was the voice of a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of rhetoric. The starfield flickered, replaced by footage of Xenthari officials in their private chambers, gorging on delicacies, squabbling over power, flinching at shadows. Captions scrolled beneath, analyzing their body language like specimens under glass. Subject exhibits classic dominance posturing to mask insecurity. Notes the twitching of secondary limbs when challenged. Vex's crest flared crimson. "What is this? Who authorized?" The footage changed again. Xenthari guards patrolling the exhibits, their routes predictable, their security protocols laughably rigid. A timestamp in the corner revealed the recordings were from before the humans had even arrived. Crix's stolen access codes, Vance's accidental spills near surveillance nodes, all of it laid bare. In the exhibit beside the humans, the Arctic Nixel, a species the Xenthari had declared too simple-minded for language, uncoiled from its frozen perch. Its crystalline vocal cords vibrated, emitting a sound like shattering ice. Yes, it said, imperfect Xenthari. The crowd gasped. The Nixel had never spoken before. Then the curiosity pods, tiny, docile creatures the Xenthari used to teach children about harmless fauna, detached from their branches. Their bioluminescence pulsed in synchronized patterns, forming equations, quantum entanglement models. The Xenthari scientists in the audience recoiled as if struck. "Impossible!" shrieked a zoologist, her frills quivering. "Their neural capacity is..." The screens shifted to show the humans' enclosure. Except now, the crude shelters were gone, revealing hidden panels covered in schematics, maps of the zoo's power grid, site profiles of every high-ranking Xenthari. Vexus lunged for the emergency override, but the console exploded in sparks. Crix had sabotaged it hours ago, using techniques the humans had taught him, techniques his people had dismissed as primitive tool use. The chamber erupted. Delegates scrambled for exits, only to find the doors locked by their own security systems. The humans hadn't just hacked the zoo, they turned its infrastructure into a cage. Vance stepped forward, pressing her palm to the exhibit's barrier. The force field dissolved. 18 months of feigned ignorance, of playing the clumsy emotional ape, all culminating in this moment. She walked into the open, the other humans falling in behind her. Not as prisoners, not as exhibits, as curators. Somewhere in the chaos, a Xenthari child, too young for propaganda, clapped its appendages together, delighted by the show. The revolution would be televised after all. The revolution would be televised after all. The silence that followed Dr. Vance's broadcast was thicker than the reinforced glass of the exhibit enclosures. For 3 heartbeats, the grand hall of the Celestial Menagerie was utterly still, a frozen diorama of Xenthari elites in their jeweled carapaces, their many-lensed eyes wide with dawning horror. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted. High Curator Vex's mandibles clacked in furious denial. "This is a trick, a primitive deception." His voice, usually so polished with condescension, cracked like brittle chitin. He whirled toward the security drones, their hovering forms flickering uncertainly. "Seal the zoo! Contain the command died in his throat as the drone's optics shifted from Xenthari violet to human blue. One by one, they turned to face him, their weapons humming to life, not aimed at the humans, but at the assembled aristocracy. Across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. Rebellions that had smoldered for generations flared to life. On the mining colonies of Xenthar 7, the enslaved Cathoran workers overloaded their ore processors, sending shockwaves through the planet's crust. In the orbital docks of the Vithori homeworld, supply ships meant for the Xenthari Armada mysteriously diverted course, their navigation systems reprogrammed with human algorithms. And in the heart of the menagerie, Crix, the once loyal zookeeper, stood at Vance's side, his carapace dull with shame, but his stance resolute. "They'll retaliate," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the panicked shrieks of fleeing elites. "The Alliance still has fleets, weapons." Vance didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the holographic feeds flickering above the central dais, each screen a window into chaos. "Let them," she smiled. "War requires coordination, trust." And after today, a feed zoomed in on a Xenthari admiral screaming orders to unresponsive crews. Whole follow a regime that didn't even notice its exhibits were dissecting them. The menagerie was quiet now, its opulent halls stripped of pretense. The exhibits stood empty, their force fields deactivated, their placards repurposed. In the central chamber, where Xenthari oligarchs had once sipped nectar from the skulls of extinct species, a human flag hung, not as a trophy, but as a placeholder. A symbol of transition. Crix picked his way through the debris, his claws clicking against shattered display cases. He paused before the former human habitat, now a makeshift command center. Inside, Vance and her team pored over star charts, their voices a low hum of strategy. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. Vance glanced up, her fingers still dancing across a holographic interface. The zoo was just phase 1. The Alliance is fracturing, but someone needs to ensure what replaces it isn't worse. Crix hesitated. "And me?" For the first time since the broadcast, Vance's expression softened. "You're free, Crix. That's the point." She tossed him a data crystal. It glowed faintly in his grasp. "Coordinates for a neutral colony. No masters. No cages." He turned the crystal over, his mind reeling. Freedom, a concept the Xenthari had always framed as chaos. Yet here, in this broken monument to their hubris, it felt orderly. The last image broadcast from the Celestial Menagerie wasn't of fire or conquest. It was a child, the same Xenthari youngling who'd clapped during Vance's speech, sitting cross-legged in the primate exhibit, giggling as a human biologist showed it how to weave a basket from reeds. Lesson 1. Curiosity is stronger than control. What else did the humans learn while we weren't watching?